I'm Shannon.
And I'm Mark.
And this is Dirt Sailor the Podcast. On this episode of Dirt Sailor the Podcast, we will be discussing Israel, Hamas, Ukraine, Russia, Elon Musk, and some of our worldwide problems. Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
Well, happy Throat Punch Thursday.
How are you doing on this fine day?
Doing okay. How are you?
Not too bad. Thank you for asking. Getting back into the swing of things.
Yes. So,
Sewing.
we cover current events. We cover world events. And I try to dabble into geopolitics every once in a while, which I know absolutely nothing about. And now I've been immersing myself into, since I'm a stay-at-home
Husband
recovering from open heart surgery guy right now, for a couple more weeks anyway. Been immersing myself into this Israeli-Hamas conflict. And I've learned a little bit.
What have you learned?
Well, I've learned that a lot of people, for some reason, despise or hate Jewish people.
For thousands of years.
Well, I honestly think the current batch of haters don't know what they're hating. Especially when you listen to young college kids, young skulls full of mush, that haven't had the opportunity to go through life yet and see things through the right prism. They're just following the lead of others, which means about 99% of them in college right now are going to be good little followers. I don't think there's any leaders in the groups.
We definitely have a lot of followers in college. So what's the point? Are we just creating another owned group of people? They are following certain teachings to the end of the earth, so to speak. And then they are so indebted that they become essentially a slave to their ideals.
They're going to be a slave to their ideals and their governments. And I've also been watching the reactions to a lot of pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas people around the world that seem to think that what happened on Saturday a couple weeks ago is Israel's fault.
Yes, I've heard that.
That Israel made up most of the videos, that a lot of it didn't happen. A lot of the Hamas and Palestinian leadership does not believe one single video. When it's a good thing that some of these Hamas guys that came across the border were obviously thugs and murderers because they went after civilians. But they weren't smart enough to take the documentation that they had in their pockets and burn it before they went into war.
Burn after reading?
Yeah, since a lot of the documentation shows that they were intentionally trained and intentionally going after women, children, and older grandmas and grandpas.
Yes, and in fact, not only are they saying it's not real, they're saying they're AI-generated videos. So apparently they killed no one, they came over and did nothing, or they didn't even come over. Was that AI-generated too? Was that fake too? Hamas didn't perform any action at all whatsoever. Is that what we're supposed to believe?
Yeah, we're supposed to believe it was AI Palestinians or Hamas coming across the border and creating an AI atrocity. So none of it's real. This is a wag the dog. This is just to bring light to the fact that somebody wants a two-state solution and now it's not going to happen. What interests me, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You're good.
Is the fact that there's all these Arab countries. I don't want anybody in the Arab world to get angry at me. I don't want Palestinians to get angry at me. This is a simpleton American that sees things from the outside. I look at all news outlets, not just one. There is not one Arab country that has opened their borders right now so the people in Gaza can flee and go hide out until this conflict is over with. Nobody wants them.
No one in that area
it's
will
interesting.
open their doors.
Everybody wants to say mean and derogatory things towards Jewish people. In Hamas's charter, is not a two-state solution. It's the death of Jews, period. They don't want Jews. They don't like Jews. They want them eradicated and gone. Yet the people in Egypt, Saudi, Jordan, and other countries their proclamation isn't the death of Palestinians, but they don't want them. So what is the stigma, or what's the problem with Palestinian people?
Yeah, what's the great rub? Why will Iran funnel money to Hamas for the death of Israelis, but they won't simultaneously take in their people?
No one complains about the fact that all the money goes for terrorist items like weapons, underground tunnels. None of it goes to the infrastructure there in Gaza.
Now, all of the money that has been given over the years to help the Palestinian people themselves, whether it's food, shelter, clothing, better life, etc., that money has gone to Hamas and terrorist activities.
Yes. Here's another, I don't want to say astute observation, because I'm not astute. I'm just a common guy. I'm just a simpleton. Is the fact that I said this last week, and you and I both said it before about other things. This is a dispute about
A border, land.
Yeah, dirt. And the same thing's going on with the Ukraine-Russia conflict right now. And if you look at the numbers of Ukrainians and Russians that have died over the last 18 to 24 months, it's hundreds of thousands. Not my numbers, State Department numbers. But nobody that's in dispute with, and I'm talking about Americans at colleges and even some of our Congress people, no one's disputing the border war or the land dispute in Ukraine. We're just pumping them full of billions of dollars and weapons, which, by the way, are making their way to the Gaza Strip, along with massive amounts of weapons we left in Afghanistan. But the Ukraine war is okay. That's a good war. But it's what? Just like Israel. It's a land dispute. And I always say, you always say, these folks create the problem.
And then they say they're the solution.
So you can go back to 1948.
1948 is when Israel established itself again in the region.
Right. And prior to that, when I believe it was the Arab League, I don't know if they were there back then. They probably called themselves something different. But they all got together with Britain and others to make it a colony and to start separating out the land, basically.
Yes, because it had been in dispute for many, many years. We're talking hundreds into really the thousands. It has been in dispute.
So here's a question for experts from a non-expert. Palestinians are Muslim?
I believe so. Many of them are.
So then they would most likely follow the Quran?
I believe so.
So has any experts ever sat the Bible and the Quran side by side and dated the information to see realistically what the property or what the land might have been called 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago? Wouldn't it be something, and I've made this statement 100 times over the years, wouldn't it be something if the La Brea tar pits in Southern California was actually Palestinian land? So if we could backdate that and figure that out, that it actually was, do you believe for a second that they would want to be flown here, set up in some pretty nice housing, and given the La Brea tar pits as their two-state solution?
They wouldn't want that.
No. And I know I'm saying that tongue in cheek because I know the La Brea tar pits is not their property. It's not the land of holy people. But, you know, how long are we going to continue on with this? Obviously, it's been going on for thousands of years. So we're going to go on with this for another 1,000 years?
Or more until the second coming of Jesus. there will be a dispute over who gets it. If you want a whole people annihilated, are you ever going to be satisfied with a two-state solution?
No, you're not. And that's why I look at Iran. You and I talked about the Persians and when they swapped their names over from Persians to Iranians. And, they sure provide the world with a lot of hate, discontent, and a lot of lip service. They've made another threat to the Jewish people that if they escalate, and to me, escalate means if they defend themselves.
Yes. They essentially said if you defend yourself.
And then, see, I hark back to our military days, and like we always say, you don't know what you don't know. But let me just throw this at them. I do know what I do know. And I do know that those two carrier battle groups that are going into the Eastern Mediterranean, it's not the ships that are on the surface that I would be concerned about. Because if you really, really anger people, it's the ones below the surface that are fully capable of handling the entire situation by themselves in less than 1 hour. So, you guys really should calm down. Think about what you're saying, because at some point in time, there's potentially going to be somebody in office here in America that's like the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, and they're not going to tolerate this anymore.
Or they take you seriously. They take you at your word.
Or they're going to take you at your word, and they're going to defend this motherland to the fullest extent of our capabilities.
100%. Was it the best solution? Is it the only solution? Question mark.
Right. No, and it never is. The ultimate solution is, let's not worry about, well, I guess you can worry about whose land it is, but let's not worry about whose land it is, and let's worry about cohabitating and living together. Life by itself, without worrying about blowing each other up monthly, is enough.
Yeah, let's live without the constant threat of an incoming missile.
Well, now they have to be concerned about Hezbollah coming down from the north.
They've already started taking out different security features, if you will, in the north. Hezbollah is taking out different security-related items and testing the capabilities on a two-front war.
Right. And the IDF says they're fully capable of handling a two-front, even a three-front if they have to. A newscaster on a major network made a very interesting comment today that we need to be mindful that somebody here may pop off a nuke. And I know Israel has never asked for us for ground troops or for air support or anything in the battle group like we have there now, and we're actually sending troops into the theater.
I believe over 2,000 have received their notice that they could potentially be going over
Right.
to...
Most of them are in the advisory role
at this time.
in the medical field.
Yes. And what's interesting, 2 months ago on this podcast, we were talking about what September was going to look like. And there was a lot of rumor that we were going to see new rounds of lockdowns and masking to increase. And while we haven't seen a big adoption of mask mandates and lockdowns as a whole, we have seen it in hospitals. The number of people that you're allowed to have visit, depending on the hospital, some it's only 1 a day. Some it's 2 a day, if at all. And we're getting back into the masking and lockdowns in those areas and a few others. But we did not see the big mask mandates and lockdowns that had been talked about for September. But I will say what I did not foresee in October was another war. We have Ukraine, Russia, that we've obviously had involvement with the United States, and we've been sending billions, as you just noted earlier, sending billions and sending weapons. Now we have Israel And so our support is for Israel. The last time they had a big bombardment on the Iron Dome, we sent money to help them get the weapons back and get the Iron Dome completely replenished. But right now, we have a situation where we do not have a Speaker of the House. And so should we choose to send money, we don't have that ability right now because we have no speaker to bring these items to the table.
Yes, and thankfully for Israel and for the 10-year plan, Senator Marco Rubio had set something in motion, I guess, either this year, last year, in recent times, that they're able to get money based on the plan that he put together with a couple of other senators that has been approved and is working.
So that is something to be thankful for. Apparently, in our history, with Biden, tens of millions of dollars in COVID relief funds went to a group that is accused of harboring Hamas terrorists. So our money has been spent on both sides of this war. Even our COVID relief funds apparently went that way. But what we don't have money for is the safety and security of U.S. persons who happen to be in Israel and are in need of evacuation, because the United States is requiring that these individuals sign a promissory note to repay the costs that would be outlaid for their rescue. So we have money for Ukraine. We have money for Hamas. We have money for Israel. We have all of this money that we can send all over the world. But when our United States people are in their time of need, we say you pay us.
Well, we never look out for number one. But see, we're a capitalistic society, so we're doing exactly what we do. That's what corporations do. That's what small business does. And that's what governments do. They make money off their citizenry. If it's not through the tax base, it's exactly what you just articulated right now. But what's the common theme here with sending COVID money to an organization that sends the money to Hamas? We have a president, his son, his brother, which would be Biden, his uncle, and other family members that have received millions of dollars from other countries. So he's in bed with China. He's in bed with Ukrainian companies. He's in bed with south of the border, south of Mexico's border, countries down there they're gleaning money off of. They've stopped a majority of the sanctions, or they've stopped enforcing them on Iran. So now Iran, forget about the couple of $1 billion that we did in exchange for $6
billion for 5 terrorists.
$6 billion for 5 Americans, and then 5 or 6 of their guys. They did an equal swap plus cash. They set that money in the bank, and then that allows them to take other monies that they would have designated for other places and start handing that money out to terrorist organizations. But he seems to make all the wrong decisions. But I don't know if he's making them, because if you looked at him trip up the stairs again,
he just did it this week. And not just the stairs, he did it walking flat across a stage. He did it again, and there were no stairs involved.
See, and that's because the man is 80 years old. He has some type of brain dysfunction, whether it's Alzheimer's or dementia, or he's in the beginning stages of MS, or
his brain aneurysms that he actually had surgery on, yes, in the 80s. Perhaps something is coming back around.
Yes. So, as we've said multiple times, we do not believe that he's the one pulling the strings here. Somebody else is. Kind of bothers me, though, that a few days ago he came out and he unequivocally supports Israel. And then 2 days later, on a news report says, yes, I support them, but we got to slow down in Gaza. We don't want to create this kind of problem. We can't occupy. We don't know if the intelligence is good. And I believe that. You know why I believe they don't know if the intelligence is good? Because we have messed the pooch up multiple times here the last 2 to 5 years on intelligence. The intelligence in Afghanistan was wrong. Let's
Terrible.
go back even further.
Horrible.
The intelligence on Iraq and WMDs was wrong.
Okay, can I speak to that though? Something that has bothered me, or something that I just kind of said earlier on this podcast. What if I take you at your word? Saddam Hussein repeatedly said he had WMDs over and over and over again.
True.
So I took you at your word. Intelligence is wrong. We got it wrong. I'm not discounting that. But if I take you at your word, do you get to walk it back and say I never had them in the first place?
No, I agree with you. So
but the intelligence was still wrong because we chased all around that country trying to find them.
Right, and it wasn't just us. It was multiple countries that supposedly have great intelligence sources, and they were all wrong. Or actually, they were all right, because I believe that the reason that Junior went into Iraq was to avenge Saddam Hussein putting a hit out on his dad.
And I can accept that.
Yeah. Cut and dry, it was let's go take this guy out.
And we did. Unfortunately, look at how many people it cost us.
Yes, and that's the enemy of my enemy is my friend, because we propped up that puppet. We provided him with millions of dollars when there was a Sunni-Shia war between Iran and Iraq. And, we talk about, and that's where you can dive into geopolitics and scratch your head, because on one hand, I'm saying that Iran has been helping Hezbollah and Hamas through proxy, yet we do the exact same thing.
All the time.
Because I believe back during Russia's time when they were in Afghanistan, I believe they were fighting what was called the Mujahideen, which then became the Taliban. But we supported them.
We supported the Taliban
to fight Russia. And then a few years later, we end up going to war with now what's called the Taliban. And I may have the names.
We had the Taliban, we had Al-Qaeda, you have ISIS. We start this to help ourselves, but these individuals are doing it to help their own countrymen. But if you get free stuff from the United States, are you going to say no?
No, they'll continue to take it.
War, weapon, and training.
And that was a case where we had sent hundreds of Stinger missiles to shoot down Russian helicopters and Russian planes. And after that conflict, when Russia put their tail between their legs and left because them goat herders kicked their butts, contrary to popular belief, they're pretty tough fighters, even though there's issues with them as well. There was hundreds of those Stinger missiles left there. So that was another Afghani, hey, Russia's pulling out. We left millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars in weapons there, and nobody ever knew what happened to them.
So let's go into the Wayback Machine. Okay, not that far back, but just a few years ago, and I promise you there's a connection here, so stay with me. Just a few years ago, Joe Biden told us that we needed to get the jab in order to stop the spread of COVID. And he originally told us that it would be 100% effective. That was one of his first stumping for getting the shot, was 100% effective. And he did so on Don Lemon's show, on the show he used to have. And then this same Don Lemon suggested that if you don't get the jab, you don't get to, and then he had a whole list of things. You don't get to go to your kid's sports game. You don't even get to go to the grocery store. And there were several people, I believe Anderson Cooper bought in on this, and several other of these left-leaning. They're not supposed to be political, but they are very political types. News commentators came out and said, you can't even go to the grocery store. We don't think you should be allowed to go to the grocery store if you don't get the jab. You don't participate in society if you don't get the jab. So All of these suggestions came out that people who don't should just be kicked out. So now here we are with Hamas, and Hamas is killing babies. Hamas is killing children, unarmed women, grandparents. They indiscriminately killed, kidnapped, raped. Yes, I'm just going to stop there. But what have we been seeing from these same individuals on the left? They have been saying that it is a war crime for Israel not to feed, water, and shelter their attackers. They say if Israel, despite the fact that they're getting attacked, despite the fact that people are getting murdered, despite the fact that women are kidnapped and raped and held hostage, if they don't supply them with all of their daily living items, they are in the wrong. Israel is. So the same people who said no jab, no food on Americans are saying it doesn't matter if you were raped, tortured, your family was murdered, you better feed your attacker. You better house your attacker. You better clothe your attacker. You better make sure they have water. All of life necessities, or else you're the war criminal.
It just has to do with the hatred for Israel and Jews. That's all.
It does.
It does. Because here I'm looking at a non-AI story. An Israeli family of 5. Civilians. Family of 5. Killed by Hamas during the attack. All 5 of them were found together holding and hugging each other. So I'm sure that young family, the young kids that look like they're in their late teens, early 20s, probably going to college, woke up Saturday morning 2 weeks ago and had no clue what they were about to face. A group that goes after civilians and not after military targets.
Yeah, but we're supposed to believe that it never happened. They would never do that. Hamas is on the up and up. Their indiscriminate firing of rockets is okay because Israel has the Iron Dome, even though those rockets do land.
Which, by the way, left-leaning newscasters, if you look at the Articles of War and the Geneva Convention, firing rockets, missiles, projectiles into the civilian population is a war crime.
So Hamas is committing war crimes. Hamas, who says they represent the Palestinian people, they were originally elected, I believe it was, and some say today they would still have Hamas as their representative. But Israel cuts off water or power, and they are the true war criminals.
Well, if Hamas cared about their population, number one, when Israel started the incursions into Gaza, they would have told their women and children to head south down some of the protected corridors instead of putting up roadblocks and telling them to turn around and go back. All of the tunnel systems, if you look at the maps that Israel has been able to gather over the years, guess where their weapons and their communication centers and their operations centers are conveniently located?
Where there are children.
Yes.
Where there are women.
Under schools, under hospitals, under normal businesses. That's not the way a war-fighting unit that's actually trying to accomplish something for their people do things. That's how a terrorist organization does things.
Yes, they want to make sure that women and children are the ones that are harmed. So that way they can push forward their cause of Israel targets women and children. Never mind that they do. Never mind what they're doing. They have the just cause.
Yeah, they're wholesome.
So here in America, we've been warned about possible calls for attacks because the leader of Hamas has called for jihad across the world. We have been seeing it. In France, there has been murder at the hands of people who support the ideals of both Hamas and ISIS. Apparently, as long as it's jihad, they're happy. whoever's asking for it. But it's also happened in, I believe it was Belgium. We've been seeing the conflicts in London. In Los Angeles, there was a clash between pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli people. In New York, there has been pro-Palestinian, as they say, protests. But these individuals are not saying we support the Palestinian people. They're saying we support what Hamas did. We support the terrorist actions.
Yeah, a bunch of them in Australia when they were down at that big, beautiful dome.
Oh, the Sydney Opera House?
Yeah, the Opera House were chanting, burn the Jews, death to the Jews, when they didn't ask for that. But, going back to America here, like you said, our southern border is so porous and open still right now. They have, again, within the last 2 days, caught 4 more Iranians that were on the terror watch list. If you look at the total numbers, there's been thousands of Afghanis that have tried to come through the southern border. There's been over 1,000 Chinese. There's been a bunch of Yemeni. There's been a bunch from Saudi. I believe it was like 11 nations over there of people we've trapped at the southern border. And what's crazy about all that? They're not coming with their wives and their kids.
Men.
It's men of fighting age. So it doesn't matter whether they're going to get a job now and be lone wolves and hide until they're asked to do something, or they're going to come over and start doing something now. What I will tell you is, though, what these people don't realize from a lot of these countries, like even in Iran, there's 300 million people in America. There is well more than 300 million weapons in America. And they always talk about the World War II Japanese attack when they woke up the sleeping lion. They have no idea what kind of stuff they would be dealt if they ever do an attack like that. I'm not talking about airplanes driving into buildings or trucks loaded with bombs. If it's a lone wolf or a bunch of them, they're going to reap what they sow.
I think they've gotten the idea that America's so woke, there's no one left to defend it.
Oh, just go to the middle of this country, because the numbers still are, if you look at the Bible Belt and you go from Florida and you curve what looks like a smiley face through the states, over 40% of military enlistees are from that belt.
Are you talking about the flyover states?
Yes.
And the Bible Belt?
And that would happen to be all the ones that talk with a redneck accent, or they've got their own dialect, and they're all hunters. They're all fishermen. Who do you think most of our great special forces guys, where they're from?
They're from the wokest place ever. Not.
A bulk of them are from that Midwestern area. There's still some from California, New York, and other states, but most of them are from the section that don't take what from people.
Where to go from here?
I know where I would go from here.
Where would you go from here?
Well, you're still a youngster.
I am?
Yeah, you're still young. I'm 60. The only thing that I'm a chronic complainer about is the fact that how the populace in all countries bears the brunt of leadership's problems. And I don't just mean that within war. Everything that our current leadership in D.C. has done the last 2.5 years has wrecked the American citizenry. They've taken a bunch of our retirements away, and I know you and I have beat this horse several times. Fuel prices are through the roof. Grocery prices are still up. Housing prices are so up, along with the interest rates, that people can't afford houses right now. People are losing their homes. And
they can't afford to rent.
No, and rents are as high or higher for a smaller space than buying a home.
And that, you have to figure that the landlord has to take a chance and hedge their bets too, between everything going up and whether or not somebody is going to default. So they're entitled to make some money as well. I don't begrudge a person for making money. So that's part of them owning multiple properties, is so that they can make money. But the way these interest rates have gone and the way the cost of doing business has gone, that causes rents to go up too in order for them to still make some money. Now, if we want to say that you can't own more than so many single family homes to stop big business from taking over and making it wholly unaffordable, whether or not you want the government intervention, that's a different story. I know people have been talking about that, how to do like a 1-for-1. You're only allowed to own one house instead of having companies own. But that still doesn't stop people or doesn't help people to be able to afford something when the prices of every single thing has gone up. Everything. So what are you going to do when the real income hasn't gone up as much as the cost of things, especially over a very short period of time? If the cost of housing is doubled in 3 years in some locations, do you expect your company to be able to afford doubling everyone's salary?
You'll never see
in
that.
2 years, 3 years?
You'll never see that. You'll never see that. And one thing you'll see, though, is the first thing these, quote, experts, these college graduates look at that have these theories, then they try to put it into practical application and it doesn't work right. It just rapes the citizenry, is the fact that when revenues come in and the numbers aren't where they think they should be, what's the first thing they want to do? Raise taxes.
Well, they want to just tax those wealthy elitists who never seem to pay enough money. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I have heard tax the rich for many a years. And every time I hear of taxes going up, it's never enough. They increase taxes if you had a health care plan that was the Cadillac plan. They increased taxes if you made over $250,000. They increased taxes if you made over $1 million. Oh, if you sold your home in Los Angeles and it sold for more than $5 million, they increased taxes there. Oh, your sales tax, oh, they increased taxes there. They have been increasing taxes across the board. And yet, it is never enough. Ever.
And it never will be.
Perhaps we have a spending problem here, and we don't spend money very well.
Well, that is 100% accurate. We have a spending problem, and we also have an education problem with voters, because they really don't do their due diligence. They don't look at the candidates. They go based off of their looks. They go based off of how they can articulate a situation, which I call them snake oil salesmen.
Vote blue no matter who. Vote aye until you die. Vote red until you're dead.
And I guess if you're in that rut, you're a lower income person, and it's all you've ever seen and that's all you believe you're going to see, then their baloney line coming from blue or others works. But when you have middle class people and upper middle class like ourselves, and we see how hard it is to generate this income, we see how hard it is to maintain it, we try to do things for our families and donations to churches and other organizations to make everything right, it's not enough. And when you say that magic number of 250,000, you're the one that educated me a couple of years ago about that. I'm thinking 250,000, well, maybe that is a lot of money. Well, no, it's not. That's a couple that potentially one of them is a police officer or a firefighter, the other one's a nurse, an RN or a PA, and they're going to be well over 250,000. And if you parse them and split them in half, they're by no means wealthy.
No, and if you look at those two individuals, you look at them as two individuals trying to make it off a single person's salary. It's a hard task to do. They get married, and then all of a sudden, all of the little caveats and carve outs of we're not going to tax you anymore for this, they will heap on the taxes. And so if you're a single person making $250,000 or two married people making $125,000 each, you went from decently good, not getting taxed too heavily, to all of a sudden you have no write-offs. All of a sudden you don't qualify for anything. You just went right over that threshold.
Maybe that's why they call this JOB, Journey of the Broke, because our progressive tax system and the way DC and for us in California, Sacramento, and even the local governments downtown have schemed this and set it up as such so you don't get ahead. You know, it is the land of opportunity. If you compare it to other countries like Palestine, it is one of the best things out there, but it's still not great.
We can do a lot better. And if we quit attempting to demonize our fellow Americans, oh, you make $250,000 and $1, you're a terrible person and you definitely don't pay enough taxes. And instead, we all actually worked, paid our taxes, paid a relative amount to what services should be offered or what we think is a good service. For instance, having decent drivable roads. I think most people would agree that that's something that we should have and could have. But instead, what does our state do? Demonize all people who drive gas-powered vehicles, heavily push these ultra-expensive electric vehicles, heavily tax the gas-powered vehicles in the form of fuel consumption, and then claim that, we're not getting enough out of the road tax, so we need to add an extra tax onto you because those evil people aren't paying enough and fixing the road. They reallocate that road money for pet projects and then say, oh, we can't fix your roads. We need more money. And once we keep kicking that ball down the road, we get to, people with electric vehicles, even though we highly encouraged, pushed, the ultra elitists got those vehicles, got tax money on those vehicles, got tax incentives on those vehicles. They're all out there. Oh, well, they're not paying the road vehicle tax because that comes off of gasoline. So what do? Oh, now we want to have a per mileage tax. So now they're floating that. So everybody pays their fair share. But it doesn't ever seem to go down. And then they just take the money out of the coffers, spend it on something else and say, we just don't have the money. When the money has been there the whole time, they choose to do something else with it. But they demonize electric vehicle people. They demonize gas-powered vehicles. They demonize people who drive too much. They demonize people who drive too little. When the reality is they created the situation, they created the problem, and then said they were the solution.
You just made me think of something. You know, my man, Elon Musk.
Elon Musk rules the world.
Given the opportunity to interview him, I would have to ask him that question because he is the electric vehicle guy. How do you reconcile in your business mind that they're getting a lot of the batteries from China and a lot of the lithium material, and it's being mined there by Uyghur Muslims that are basically slaves to the Chinese government?
So that's a problem, and I don't disagree with that. And a little side note on him and others, what did the U.S. government do? They offered lots of tax dollars to create an affordable electric vehicle. Elon Musk, being a money guy, he has started multiple businesses and he's about making the money. He took on the challenge. He gets the tax dollars. And that grant money basically has strings behind it. He has to produce so much, or at least that was the idea behind it, because we had companies that received our tax dollars and it went nowhere. But some of it was also in the form of loans. So they had certain paybacks that he had to do. So he gets into the business of making an electric vehicle at the behest of the government, who did, again, financial incentive, at the behest of the federal government. They started it and required it. So what do you do?
Right. See, I agree with that. I agree with the business portion of it.
But once you realize the impacts globally on humans, why do you continue?
Right. Because, the Uyghurs over in China is just one. The Sudan and other areas that have large quantities of lithium. When you look at what's happening to the young kids and the young adults in those mines, you would think they would sit back, look in a mirror, and I mean the government, not Musk. Musk is a businessman. He did what any businessman would do. But you got to look in the mirror and say, okay, is what we're trying to achieve really worth it? Can we not pause, come up with a better technology, maybe come up with the next thing better than lithium that's easier to mine? Maybe there's some way you can take crude oil out of the ground and solidify it and do some fusion with some chemicals, and turn it into a fuel cell that then generates electricity that you can drive your electric car. I mean, there has to be alternatives. And I just think that, I don't know what I think, but
I think that what we're doing and the train that we are traveling on is going to wreck. So far, people have already essentially fallen off that train or have wrecked, different cars in that long train, because California has pushed and pushed and pushed. And now we have a mandate of when we have to have electric vehicles by. The government has been a part of the problem of pushing child labor, forced labor, human trafficking, all of that. And they are not putting the brakes on.
You are correct. And I don't know if they really focus or pay attention seriously to that, because there was that movie that just came out a few months ago about human trafficking and the sex slave trade down in Mexico and other countries. And a good portion of Hollywood and Washington, D.C. and local municipalities across the country thought it was fake, that it really wasn't a problem like they're saying it is.
Yeah, somehow human trafficking, sex trafficking just doesn't happen. Or it was glorified for the white savior complex to be met with merry little happiness in their head that they could do something about a non-existent thing.
Yet when there's somebody that really does something like that, and he's in a high position of authority and power, and there's a lot of names of people across the world that they're trying to hide from the little black book, it does exist. That's why he mysteriously checked out in prison.
Checked himself out.
And his right-hand hinch lady was charged with what?
Procurement.
Of what?
Children. For whom? No one, apparently.
Name them, apparently no one. So how do you charge and prosecute when you're not willing to release the names
of the buyers?
And there's obviously a reason she hasn't released it through a proxy, because she knows the second those names start getting released,
she'll also check out.
She'll take the exact same fate.
She'll take a dirt nap. So let's talk about a U.S. Senator. U.S. Senator Bob Menendez, Democrat, New Jersey, has been indicted on charges of acting as a foreign agent. It's an escalation of his previously reported charges. He has been serving since 2006 and has entered a plea of not guilty amid the allegations that he accepted bribes from 3 New Jersey businessmen. So some of his own party has even asked for him to resign. He went through his ethics trial a couple years back, got off.
Sociopaths will never resign.
Never give up, never surrender. So now he's been charged with acting as a foreign agent, something that we'll never see Hunter Biden get charged with unless there's a changing of the guard. And even then, statute of limitations may run on some of these things. But yes, Bob Menendez has been charged on a superseding indictment. And it also includes his wife in the charges. And it is alleged that they accepted gold bars and significant monetary amounts in return for influence over various business deals, including to the Egyptian government, which is where the foreign agent stuff comes into play.
There's that Egypt again, won't open their border.
Money.
But they'll give up gold bars.
Yes, and he said part of his explanation of why he had the money and gold bars was he doesn't trust banks. So that's why they found...
Hey, that's just like that congressman or whatever he was.
Was it Louisiana?
Yeah, had the money in his freezer.
After Hurricane Katrina, right?
Yes.
It was Hurricane Katrina hit the house.
The National Guard found all the money in his freezer. It's because he didn't believe in banks either. He probably didn't believe in paying taxes on that frozen money either.
Right?
Well, I hope Menendez is not able to plea out and get some sweetheart deal where they let him retire and go away. I hope if he's guilty of these things, he goes to trial, he's found guilty, they make an example out of him, and he's punished just like any little commoner would be if they did the exact same thing. I don't know if a commoner would ever be in the position to make that kind of money or make those decisions, since I believe he was the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee.
Yes.
For many years, which means he was using his position of power and authority to enhance and benefit his family.
Yes, absolutely. And based on earlier charges, which he was found not to have...
Hung jury.
Yes. He's not found guilty of that. But I don't understand how the Senate Foreign Relations Committee chairman gets away with so much for so long. Now he's charged. He's denying it.
Well, if you look at the Clintons.
Just deny.
You look at the Bidens. You look at, I'm sure, if you were to dive into Schumer's background and look at the kind of money and homes that he owns and has generated since he's been in office, you're going to find it's pretty common practice back there. And that's what Jesse Waters from Fox News and Tucker Carlson from X has said as well, that he has lived there in D.C. his entire life, and it's always been known, not only known about the Bidens, but known about multiple people back there. That's why people like, Andrew, please don't take this wrong, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene will be a 1 or 2 term person and she'll be gone because she doesn't fit the narrative. She may have some good things to say, but she says a lot of stuff that are way outside the box. And they being the Democratic donors or even the Republican RNC, will eventually put enough money into another candidate to get rid of her.
If you look at Act Blue, they take money donations, and you might be donating to a specific cause, but if they see the money needs to be used elsewhere, that's what they'll use it on. So if they have determined that they could win in her district with a blue candidate, as long as there's enough money behind them, that's what they'll do. And they will do that anywhere they can. And speaking of what they do with all of this money, you look at Kamala Harris. She ran for Senate. She was our senator for a couple of years before she gets selected to be VP. You look at Bernie Sanders and the like. They fly around on private planes. They stay at really high-end hotels. They throw lavish parties, their donor parties or whatever they do. They use all of this money to live a lifestyle that is well above what their income can afford. So that's another way that they do these things. Not just being on the take, like Menendez appears to be, but this is another way for them to act in a manner that is not commiserate with their actual income.
And it's right there for everyone to see.
And it's legal because they've made it legal.
100%.
So yes, but to go back to what you were saying, they're going to throw money behind someone at some point to get rid of her.
I believe that they're going to do that to the Florida congressman
Matt Gaetz. Well, they already
Yes.
tried to take him down. He was investigated for procurement of
Hookers?
hookers.
Yeah. Well, I think what was in his mindset, if you watch some of his speeches and news conferences before he helped whack the Speaker of the House, what he wanted was solid and noble, but the approach and what he did, I think, from the outside looking in, was totally wrong. Because now, if we don't get the only one that's been elected by the conference, which is Jim Jordan,
Which he was coupled down on the list, but now he's elevated to number one.
right now the Dems are trying to position themselves where they could somehow push enough votes through, and one of them could become the speaker during a Republican-held Congress.
If they flip 5 Republicans. Because something that Democrats do really well is they stick together, even when they disagree with each other.
And I was thinking about that today, that
They stick together.
They do stick together, even if their sticking together is wrong, because 99.999% of their policies the last 20 years have been dead wrong. Even a lot of the policies of the Republican sides have been dead wrong also, because if they were right, we wouldn't be in the massive debt we're in. We wouldn't have multiple wars on multiple fronts right now that we're having to physically, psychologically, and monetarily deal with. It wouldn't be a mess like it is, because that's what happens. And here I go again on my soapbox with this. Go to college, write your thesis. It's a theory. You try practical application and it doesn't work. Well, it's obvious looking at the way America's in massive decline, the way that people just in office don't care about their constituents. They're all wrong, and you and I are right. Just cut and dried. If they would listen to what we have to say, we could fix this thing in a couple days. First order of business, term limits. I know you and I have talked about that
100%.
times.
Yes.
One and done, or split them up, instead of giving senators 6 years, give them 7 years. Okay, or 8 years. Done. Congressmen, instead of 2-year terms, 1, 3, or 4-year term, you're done, son. Go home. Presidency, no 2 terms. You take the 4, you add half of the second term, you give them 6, they're done. Okay. Now, I don't know about judges that get put in for life, because I think they get tainted as well. They go in, they're put into a judgeship for life, and I think their heads go off into a different direction, and they think that they're beyond reproach, and they start doing things out of character that most people wouldn't ordinarily do, when maybe there's a time, and I know why they put them in there for life, but there might be a time you need to rethink the judgeships too. And I would do this term limit thing up the chain, from local stuff, which most of them do have term limits. And I wouldn't let somebody like the way that New York governor was able to go in.
Hochul?
No. This was
Cuomo?
No, it was in between him and the one that owns the big newspaper outlet. Bloomberg. And he was able to get a third term because he skirted the policy and got something rewritten so he could run for a third term. That's wrong. Just like Governor Brown did it here in California. I don't know if it was a consecutive term thing or what the deal was, but he was able to do an extra term as well, and it's wrong.
One and done. Stop making a career out of it. Stop allowing them to say they are consultants. That's one way that they get out of having to register as a foreign agent, or having to say that they are, so lobbyists, they have to register and they're supposed to say what they're doing. But these people who go and act as consultants, and they get around these requirements, Hunter Biden, they get around some of these requirements. No more lobbying, no more special interests, no more having them, the dark money groups, no more of any of this stuff. You're only allowed to have so much money donated to you. No more dark money. Let's stop it all.
Yeah, doesn't England do that? That when they have an election, you're allowed to run for like 6 months and you get so much money from the government and that's it. It should be a matching. So the government says, okay, running for U.S. Senate in Tennessee, because of the demographics and what kind of revenues generated in that state annually, we're going to give you $2 million. And you can fundraise $2 million. That's all you get to run for office. No, like they're expecting a couple states here in the union next year. One of them's Texas. They're expecting it to be a $700 or $800 million Senate race with Ted Cruz.
Yeah, it needs to stop. That stuff needs to stop. It is an absolute waste of money. Number one, I mean, I know people can have their choice of what they want to do with their money, but there is so much influence that one person can wield with that money that I think the influence peddling, or not influence peddling, but the influence alone with that money is wrong.
Well, just think how many homeless you could help, how many low-income houses you could build.
Yeah, $700 million, you're telling me you can't have a low-income housing project. You as a personal individual making a better society. Instead, you're like, how much money can I make later from these Congress people over special interests and all of that?
Yes. You know, I'm not a Biden supporter or anybody in his cabinet, but I really don't feel comfortable with him flying into a war zone.
Well, right now, if we lose number 1 and number 2, we don't have a number 3, so we'll go down the line to number 4, which is out of the Senate.
Oh, I thought maybe it was the Master at Arms. No, he doesn't need to fly to Israel.
He can barely walk in the United States. Does he need to go anywhere?
Well, you know, happenstance, they have some great countermeasures and all that with Air Force One, and I guarantee you there's going to be a whole armada of F-35s and probably a B-2 following him too.
Okay, so obviously his safety is important, but let's talk about this from a climate change perspective.
Yes.
For someone who is constantly selling us on this idea that we need to stop polluting so that way we don't commit climate change incursions in our daily life, why would you do that?
Yeah, why fly so many airplanes over there?
Because you'll have to.
Yeah.
You'll have to. So apparently, though, in the world of climate change, Bill Gates has recently seemingly started to backtrack on some of his prior statements about climate change. His statement was, there is a lot of climate exaggeration. The climate is not the end of the planet, so the planet is going to be fine.
So one of his money-making ventures is probably losing money. So he had to backtrack on the statement until that balance sheet flips and he's making money again, and he'll make the same crazy statements.
Yeah, this is at the Earthshot Prize Innovation Summit, in case you are wanting to go look it up. But he even made a statement at a New York Times event with, there are effects on humanity, the planet less so. No temperate country is going to become uninhabitable. So I guess that could lead to Biden flying anywhere he wants with as many planes as he wants, because we're not, according to Bill Gates, as much of an effect.
Even the original person that heeded the warnings of global warming has changed his mind many, many years ago.
So does that mean we can stop this Green New Deal?
You can stop it only if you take the money out of it.
Yes. But to keep going with people in DC just a little bit.
The smartest people in the room. Let's go.
Well, I kind of agree with John Fetterman on something that he recently said. He was making an appearance on Stephen Colbert, The Late Show. And what he said was essentially that America is not sending their best and their brightest to DC.
Wonder if he was looking in a mirror when he made that statement.
Hello, pot meat kettle.
Where's he from? Virginia?
Pennsylvania.
Oh, Pennsylvania. Well, they got what they paid for there. I think they would have probably now rather had Dr. Oz than Fetterman.
I would have to agree.
Has he worn a suit yet?
I think he's worn one suit, but for the most part, he's sticking to his shirts and shorts. When he was sworn in, he wore a suit, but I'm sure that was very difficult for him.
Well, that'd be okay if you lived in Southern California down at the beach and you were part of a local city council. I mean, that would be normal. Or Hawaii.
Wear your aloha shirt.
Yeah, that'd be normal to wear your aloha shirt, pair of aloha shorts, and some slippers.
I don't get it.
I do. We've been hoodwinked.
We have been. So in the world of Social Security, VA disability, and military retirement pay, the annual numbers have come out on how much money will be there for the cost of living adjustment. Military retirees and disabled veterans and those on Social Security will see their monthly checks increase by 3.2%.
Ooh, big money.
Despite the fact that inflation has been much higher than that amount, despite the fact that our true cost of living has gone up so significantly, we will be getting a 3.2% increase. And when you look at kind of the question why, I don't understand, because this year's rate of inflation is 8.7%. And our cost of living is supposed to be tied to the rate of inflation, but we're seeing less than half.
Well, we can't do that for Americans. We got to send that money overseas.
It would appear so.
We need to send another $1 to $2 billion to Ukraine so we can pay for their firefighters and their doctors and nurses, and we can pay their pensions. Just like the car, not dealerships, but the car manufacturers. I didn't realize, because I'm non-union, so I don't follow union things, that what they're asking for, a lot of this stuff they're trying to get back was taken away from them in 2006. So what's going to happen as they go more electric, a lot of these poor guys, I think, see the writing on the wall. They're going to lose their jobs.
Apparently it doesn't take as much or as long to make an electric vehicle in comparison.
Yes.
So then they won't be working as much, is the claim.
So there you go, federal government. Thank you so much for diving in there and trying to fix the planet.
Yeah, I just touching back on the pay increases or the retirement allowances for military, retired, and veterans. So I go to military.com for some of my news, and I will say some of their slants on trying to make things sound good or better than they should have started to irk me, and maybe because this is something that affects me, I'm irked by it. So their comment or their statement, while 3.2% may look low compared to 2022, in which we got a 5.9% increase, and 2023, in which we got an 8.7% increase, it is still above the average of 2.6% for the prior 20 years. Well, great. The prior 20 years, if we go back to the 17 years, before the last 3 years, if we go back and look, guess what? Inflation wasn't like this. Inflation wasn't this bad. So of course it's going to look good to the back on average. But if you're living in difficult times with high cost of living and high inflation, giving pennies after losing dollars is not a positive. I don't understand how you have this positive spin on things. Did the government ask you to make it sound good?
So just like adjustable interest rates and rolling finances, why don't they adjust your raise based on the current rate of inflation, like a lot of municipalities do with your property taxes? If you're in a slump and it's a low time, they will take your property taxes down lower. And then when the economy turns around and your value of your home is higher, they raise your property taxes up. So for this year and last year, why doesn't the federal government go in and say, okay, the rate of inflation is at 8%. We're going to give you right now a 6.5% raise or whatever. And then proportionally, as it goes back down, then you readjust that number back down to what the current rate of inflation is. I don't know, just a thought.
Just a thought.
Just a thought. I'm not an expert at this, but just a thought.
Those people on a fixed income, your costs have gone up, but the government isn't going to match. So sorry. No upsies and downsies.
I bet they'll figure out how to raise taxes on that money.
Oh, I'm sure. Rite Aid has filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
Rite Aid.
Yep, Rite Aid filed for Chapter 11 protection this past week.
Is that a pure pharmacy, Rite Aid?
It's a drugstore.
Okay, kind of like some of the others.
Like CVS.
Like CVS and them. I wonder if all the old people, all the, what do you call them? What was that generation?
Silent generation.
No, the World War II generation and the Korean War generation that have been on pills pretty much their entire adult lives because of issues, and Rite Aid and Walgreens and them thought they were going to be able to support themselves based on that.
Well, it is the silent generation, is before the boomers.
Okay. So definitely they're losing money because a lot of them are probably gone.
Off the silent generation, the boomers are... So in Boomerville, with the cost of everything going up, including the cost of actually being on an insurance plan, boomers are paying so much for their insurance that a lot of them, they aren't able to afford the prescriptions that they would get prescribed. So they aren't, in fact, utilizing the pharmacies as much because they can't afford it. The cost of everything has gone up so significantly that they are making other choices like putting food on the table, keeping their lights on.
Yeah, it all goes to the fact that Americans are thought of last.
America Last policy.
We can take care of everybody around the world, but we cannot take care of ourselves.
No.
And if you're not healthy, then no one else is healthy.
Yep, absolutely. America Last. And in America Last, the IRS has estimated that Americans have underpaid their taxes to the tune of $688 billion. There's a tax gap from either non-filing, underpaying, or underreporting their taxes. And if they weren't so bent on getting every single tax dollar in every single random way possible, perhaps if we had a flat tax where the price is the price and everybody knows the percentage that they would have to pay, whether they have 1 job, 2 jobs, 10 jobs, everybody pays a percentage of their income. They will know exactly how much. When you do all of the stepped up bases and the special tax over here and a special tax over there, it is very difficult to follow what you're actually supposed to pay. And I don't even know how the IRS would know how much I'm supposed to pay because every year they make me tell them everything. So how do they even know that there's a tax gap?
Yeah, they're the ones that should be providing the free accountants.
Yes, and tell me how much I owe you. But the reality is a flat tax would take care of that problem.
Well, see, they don't like that. They like progressive taxes that can generate more income. Even though looking at the numbers, I believe the old pizza guy that was running for president a few years ago, his name's
Herman Cain?
Yes. He had the
999
plan. Yes.
Yes, that was definitely very catchy if we're remembering that. How much later? How much later are we talking about? Because that was 2006 to 8-ish when he was running.
It's been quite a few years and it still sticks in my head.
Yes. 9% corporate, 9% personal income, and 9% sales tax. 999.
That's not a bad plan. And you can use a state. We have 50 states. You can always use one to try the model to see if it works.
Yes, and in fact, the state sales income tax, you can make your own decision whether you want it to be 9% or you want it to be something else. But as far as the federal and corporate, We could make that decision.
I think a flat tax of 10%. That's it. No more.
Well, 10, 10, 10. Does it roll off your tongue as good as 999?
Yes. What needs to happen, though, is we need to come to an agreement with the federal government. It says, okay, you guys are taxing the bejesus out of us. We're going to go to a flat tax. But it's now your responsibility to make sure that you provide a budget every year.
Right. What did we say? There's only been 3?
3.
On time?
Yes.
Absolutely. And we have to stop supporting all of these random worldwide programs. If we can't take care of ourselves, we cannot take care of the world. And when I say these random worldwide programs, I mean we're spending money in countries for LGBTQIA plus propaganda in their countries.
Right. And they want to be LGBTQIA in their country. Let them pay for it.
Then they pay for it.
They pay for their own thing. Not us.
Yes. Among many other programs that they decide to pay for. So yes, let's stop and let's start making sure that we take care of ourselves here in the homeland.
Taking care of people on the home front. What a novel concept.
But do you know who does take care of their own people in their own home front?
Who would that be?
A retired Israeli general who rescued his family who was under siege from Hamas. And they are comparing this retired general to Liam Neeson's character in Taken, but he is the real life Taken main star. So a former Israeli general rescued his son's family from Hamas fighters during the terrorist attack on their compound. So this individual received a call from his family while he lives in Tel Aviv. So he heard the sounds of gunfire coming from his son's family's safe room in their shelter. So as this is happening, there's gunfire, they're in their safe room. This gentleman calls up his father and says what's going on. And upon hearing the news that his family was being attacked by Hamas, he immediately said to his son, "Trust me, I will come." And he said, "This is my profession. Nobody can stop me." So he left Tel Aviv with his wife, and he was armed with only a handgun, and he drove south with the intent on saving his family. He battled Hamas gunmen along the way, rescued survivors from the music festival massacre. He helped wounded Israeli soldiers, and it took him about 10 hours to get there. And once he got there, they heard a bang on the window. They heard the voice of his father, the grandfather, and the oldest daughter said, "Grandfather is here." And that's when they knew that they were safe. So there is somebody right there who takes care of his family.
My man. That is awesome. Well, Biden takes care of his son.
Biden does take care of his son and his family. If you're a Biden, you are well taken care of.
Get a nice paycheck.
We just look at it in two different ways there.
Now, the general there in Israel is the real big guy.
This has been a podcast produced and edited by the Dirt Sailor duo. Mark and Shannon are a father-daughter team who both served in the United States Navy. This production is protected by copyright laws. Until next time, anchors away.